You know, we've been in this series, Unexpected Guests, for a few weeks now. This coming up on the fourth week of this particular series. And as we've been in it, we've talked about these unexpected things that happen in the Christmas story. I want to just take a second for each of you and just ask about your particular Christmas story. Most of you have family traditions, right? Where as you're approaching this week of Christmas coming up, you already know where you're going. We're going to be at such and such's house on this day and such a house on this day, and we're going to do this kind of gift exchange, all those things. And so I would imagine that also, in addition to just those kind of normal things that you do for Christmas, I would imagine each of you kind of have the people in mind that give gifts, and you can already tell, like you could already write down on a piece of paper, like a sticky note, put in your pocket and date it, take a picture or a selfie with it, and then when you get your box, you can exchange it with that person, and it's going to say what they're giving you on it. You know what I'm saying? Like, you know what I'm talking about, specifically the gift card folks. And they've been giving gift cards since gift cards were invented, which I'm not sure when. I should have Googled that. Someone can Google that now and actually say, when is the first gift card that was ever done? I'm talking about the one swipey ones, you know what I'm saying? Like, you already know they are going to be giving you a gift card because that's all they can do. They have no creativity. It's just there. And I probably offended like 95% of our people in here. Like, dude, that's all we did was give gift cards. I hear you. I hear you. I try my best. I have given the gift card. I've given it, but I try really hard not to do the gift card thing. And I realized here's the problem. The reason that we are addicted to gift cards, like sometimes we talk ourselves into, well, they can get something that they really want. Well, I think the cool thing about giving gifts is that we know the person so well that we know what they really want. It's almost like when you receive the gift, it's like, hey, this is cool, but it's also cool that you know that I would want this. Like you've been paying attention. Like all year you've listened to who I am and what I do and all those things, and you've put together this idea that this would be pleasing to you. Now I also understand as the Christmas list grows and our time shrinks because of activities. By the way, we have a Christmas concert tonight at 6 o'clock. As those things happen in our lives, you're like, well, I would have time to not do the gift card thing if I didn't have to do your stupid Christmas concert. I get it. And that's a decent trade. A gift card for the concert's a decent trade, okay? What we find in the Bible, if y'all are willing to listen now that I've offended most all of you, we find a few guys that bring gifts that are custom made for the receiver. I want to read to you a few different passages this morning, all really the same passage, but we're going to break it up into a few little chunks. The first one is this. It starts in Matthew 2. If you want to follow along, we'll be in Matthew 2, verses 1 through 11, I believe, is where we're going to kind of chunk off today. You can follow along in your Bible. We'll also have all of these verses on the screen as well. We're going to start just with the first couple of verses. It says this: After Jesus was born in Bethlehem in Judea, during the time of King Herod, Magi from the east came to Jerusalem and asked, "Where is the one who has been born King of the Jews? We saw his star when it rose and have come to worship him." So this is the beginning. This is the beginning of this wise men story. And there's a few things we need to make sure that we point out to make sure that we understand the context of what's happening. The first one is Bethlehem. Bethlehem is a small town. It's just south of Jerusalem, about 5 miles walk. And in this small town, you wouldn't find too terribly many people. It's just a tiny little place. It's like a tiny little suburb south of Jerusalem, this big city. And in there, we find that Bethlehem's been around for a pretty good little while. In fact, in the 14th century BC, in the text of Pharaoh Amenhotep, we actually find him mentioning specifically this town called Bethlehem. One of our church fathers, Origen, in the late 2nd to mid 3rd century, he was actually quoted in writing down this passage. It says, he said, "In Bethlehem you are shown the cave where he was born," he being Jesus. "And within the cave, the manger where he was wrapped in swaddling clothes." So we have an account of just 100, 200 years after this event were kind of taking place, where people are still going to the place where it happened, this cave where they still evidently, according to Origen, had this manger that was sitting there where Jesus was placed. The second person or second thing we need to make sure we understand about the story is not only the setting or the city in which it happened, but also a couple of the main characters. In this one, there's a guy by the name of King Herod. This guy was called King Herod the Great. He was specifically given the title, the King of the Jews. Now, the way that he got this title was through wars and deceit and treachery and talks with Rome and back to Jerusalem, and then a couple of brother fights. There was a lot. It's a long history, about 25 years of political history that led to this moment where he was given the title King of the Jews. King Herod had 10 wives that we are aware of. There are 6 different versions of his will that are written down in history for us to read through, because his life has been characterized or was characterized by violence and discord. He's infamous for his run-in with the baby Jesus, Cleopatra, Mark Antony, Octavian, also known as Caesar Augustus. His own children, he murdered 2 of them by strangling them. King Herod wasn't your poster child for like saucy goodness. The next people we have in the story are the Magi. These are people that uttered prophecies. They were monotheistic by nature, but it wasn't Yahweh God. They believed in a supreme being. They also believed that there was a supreme evil, not supreme evil, but this altering force of evil, and they collided with one another. They explained omens, they interpreted dreams, they practiced fortune telling by the stars and by casting wooden sticks. Traditionally, these people were known as kingmakers, Magi, wise men. And then we have this phrase that's very important for us to hone in on, that he was born King of the Jews. The word that we want to look at is not King of the Jews. The word we want to look at is born King of the Jews. You see, when we look at Jesus, a lot of times we have this idea or this concept. We have this idea or this concept that eventually he becomes king. In fact, when we look on Netflix at all of the movies that they have about kingdoms and knighthood, and there's a ton of them right now, right? If you go watch them, I binge watch them all the time. Like at 3 a.m, you don't find me at 3 a.m, but like I watch them, and I love these knights in shining armor and these shields and these horses and all those kind of things. But when the baby's born, when the heir is born, he's not king then. He's king when his father dies. He's king when it's passed down to him, when his father gets too old and gives over the throne, the kingdom to him. There's no babies born king. Yet Jesus is. Those 4 things we need to make sure we have a good understanding of. Bethlehem, King Herod, who is he? Magi, what do they do? Why are they here? And this idea that he, Jesus, was born King of the Jews. We'll pick up in verse 3. It says this: when King Herod heard this, that these Magi were here, when he heard this, he was disturbed, and all Jerusalem with him. When he had called together all the people's chief priests and teachers of the law, he asked them where the Messiah was to be born. In Bethlehem in Judea, they replied, for this is what the prophet has written. But you, Bethlehem, and the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah, for out of you will come a ruler who will shepherd my people, Israel. As we get closer and closer to this moment of conflict, what we see is a few things we still must continue to point out. The first thing is this: when Herod heard that these wise men, these kingmakers, were there to find a new baby born king, he said, hey, here's the deal. This disturbs me. He probably actually didn't say it this way. He probably didn't say, oh no, this is perplexing to me. He probably slammed something through something and said, hey, what's going on? How can someone be born king? Because my heart's still beating. That's what he's thinking. That's my title. Why would someone be here? In fact, all of Jerusalem was disturbed, which I find fairly interesting. What you have to know about history is that the Magi people from the lower Mesopotamia, 30 years prior to this, actually ruled over this particular area of Palestine. And these people, these Magi folks, and so when they walk into town, most likely with a decent-sized armored guard, because of the conflict between these 2 neighboring nations, when they came into town and they pronounced that there was born now a king of the Jews, there were flashbacks happening in people's minds like, hold on, just 30 years ago, you ruled this land, and now are you saying that there's a new ruler from your people that are here? Like, what's happening? Which is why it says that it not only disturbed King Herod, but all of Jerusalem with him. Everyone was in a little bit of a tiss of what was happening. I think it's interesting that we call these Magi Kingmakers. Kingmakers in our world. They show up and they anoint, they pronounce, and they say this is what happens. I love, though, what our author here says. He was king of the Jews before the kingmakers ever showed up. The question then leaves us, who really is the kingmaker? Who honestly makes those decisions? A second person we want to kind of point out is this prophet that's spoken of. When he asked them, hey, what is this about? They said, well, this is what the prophet said. He'll be born in Bethlehem. He will shepherd his people Israel. This prophet they're referring to is the prophet Micah, chapter 5, verse 2. 700 years or so before Jesus shows up on the scene, he's talking about the city and what specifically this baby will do, born king of the Jews. Now, what I also find interesting is there's a group of people in this story called the people's chief priests and teachers of the law. Now, when we look at this, we're talking about Jewish people, so the Jewish people's chief priests and teachers of the law. These were the religious representatives for the people of Israel. And so he called them in. He said, hey, whoa, why don't you tell me what's happening? They're the only people that could have quoted the Old Testament, that could have quoted that prophet. These weren't like people hanging out in the court of Herod back and forth that had no religious or Jewish training. These were Jewish people. Now, what's interesting about these folks is their relationship with Herod when they come in to consult. They come in to consult, and do you notice how they respond? Well, this is it. This is what the prophet says. We're going to get to that in a second. Verse 7, and we're going to get there. Then Herod called the Magi secretly and found out from them the exact time the star had appeared. You know, notice this is the first time there's a conversation, or at least an intentional conversation with Herod and the Magi. Before then, they announced they're coming. They probably have looked at the palace, but he says, hey, let's get back together. I've got a plan. So there's been conversation that's happened between the verses we just read and these verses. And it leaves Herod with this idea. Then Herod called the Magi secretly and found out from them the exact time the star had appeared. He sent them to Bethlehem and said, go and search carefully for the child. As soon as you find him, report to me so that I too may go and worship him. Now what we know is I'm going to spoil the ending for you. Herod wants to kill Jesus. And so in just a few verses, he's actually going to make a decree that says, hey, every single baby born in this little area, all the boys, kill them all. Everyone under the age of 2. That's what his response is going to be that the Bible records here in just a few verses. And so that's what he's planning and plotting, and what's happening here is that, hey, if I can just find out where he is, then I can find out where he is, and I can take care of what I need to take care of. Now, what I find here for us specifically, something that maybe we can resonate just a little bit, is this ulterior motive that's happening. He fronts as one thing, but secretly he has some other plan kind of going on in his mind. Do you resonate with that ever? I don't mean like on the grand scheme of what's happening here in this particular moment, but just in general. Do we ever approach life that way or relationships that way? Where we present one thing knowing that we're actually secretly hoping for another? I want to leave you with this in this moment before we move on, is that's this. Ulterior motives ruin Christmas. Ulterior motives ruin Christmas. That's the truth. I would suggest to you that as you plan to get together with your family, that maybe you create a new strategy. If you have this end game in mind, if you have this thing that you want to accomplish, maybe check your motives a little bit. Maybe ask God, is this the best way to approach what we're about to approach? Is this the best way for us to get involved in this conversation? And ultimately, maybe ask yourself, what do you really want to happen from it? Can your desired outcome, is it best for everyone? Is it what God desires? And if God were writing the playbook, would he write it the way you've planned it out? You see, ulterior motives, when we talk about our families, it's fueled by selfishness. Honestly, they make the world a worse place because ultimately, it's all about me, and what I want. And it either signals a lack of distrust on the front end of the relationship or a desire for something negative on the back. Either way, it's a lose-lose. If you could take that with you, I think that would be a good present for Christmas. The second question I have is back to that first thing I brought up before we read the last passage, is what happened to the chief priests and those teachers? What happened to the people's teachers, the people's religious representatives? Where did they go? Why weren't they involved? Why weren't they a part of what was happening? You would think that these people had been waiting on the Savior, this Messiah, that they had just told the king about. When he said, hey, what's going to happen? Where is this going to be? They had all of the information. They knew who, what, where, when, why. They knew all of the information. Yet all they did was give him the information. If they were really interested in learning more about him, finding this person, don't you think they would have accompanied the Magi? Or specifically, don't you think they would have gotten a head start? I'm not waiting on those guys. If this is the person we've been waiting for 700 years, don't you think they would have got a head start? The question becomes why? Why were they not interested in seeing this child born king? Maybe it's because they were king of their lives and king of their religion, and they knew there was no room for him. Maybe their hearts were the exact same as that of Herod. That's a scary place to be. It's either that explanation or they were simply apathetic. They just didn't care. Verse 9, after they had heard the king, they went on their way, and the star they had seen when it rose went ahead of them until it stopped over the place where the child was. When they saw the star, they were overjoyed. On coming to the house, they saw the child with his mother Mary, and they bowed down and worshipped him. Then they opened their treasures and presented him with gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. You know what's interesting in this passage that we sometimes miss is it says, on coming to the house. We recognize that the wise men don't belong at the manger. Not because they don't belong, just because they were never there. And so this is the deal. What I need you to do, if you want to be a good Christian, today, why are you laughing? Why is there giggles? There's no giggles. I'm being serious. If you want to be a good Christian, when you go home today, you sit your children down, you take the wise men, and you break them over your knee, and you throw them out the window and say, they don't belong at the manger. That's what you do. You explain that to them. They're in our nativity because they're a huge part. They're a huge part of the Christmas story. And honestly, it's really expensive to buy a manger and a house and decorate all of that. So that's why they combine it. That's the story. They find the babe at a house. The other interesting thing about the passage, if we look into the original language, there's actually two different words used here to describe Jesus as a child. One is paidion, the word for child of someone being 18 months or under. Specifically, in this particular instance, it's the word brephos, which refers to a toddler. And so the clues are there in the original language to tell us that they were never at the manger. They found him at a house, and they found Jesus most likely babbling something incoherent, eating everything in sight that he could put his mouth on, and probably walking a bit. And they bring gifts, custom gifts. They bring gold because that's what happens when you meet a king. They bring frankincense, extracted from a tree's resin. It's an expensive fragrance. When it's warmed or burned, it produces this sweet aroma. It's specifically part of the exclusive incense in the inner sanctum, or the most holy place, the Holy of Holies, which tells us that it's true what the prophet said, that he will be called Emmanuel, or God with us. They bring myrrh, a fragrant gum from an Arabian tree which was used in Christ's burial preparations. Specifically, myrrh would be part of the embalming process. It's a preview that he was born to die. Do you notice how each person responds to Jesus? We just went through a whole list of people and characters, and we talked about what they did when they heard the news. Do you notice how they respond to Jesus? Herod responds with jealousy and fear and anger and ulterior motives. Specifically, when we talk about Herod and the way he responds, I have to ask you this question. What are your thoughts on a new king for Christmas? Do you have room for him? How do you respond? For the chief priests and the teachers of the law, they showed indifference. What is the source of your apathy if that's the way you are towards Christmas in Jesus. If you're apathetic, if you're just like, I'm just not interested. I'm not interested because I just don't see the point, or I don't benefit from it, or I just don't see the need. Like, what is the source of the apathy? Is it unanswered prayers? Is it this list of things you've been praying for quite some time that have seemed to never get attention? And you've kind of bailed because you feel like he bailed on you? Why else could you be apathetic? Is it because of hypocritical Christians? Is it because there are people that claim to follow him that simply walk in circles because they're following themselves? Is it people who have given the church and the Christ child a bad name? I get it. I will say this, please do not allow the crowd around the manger to cause you to hate the baby that lays inside of it. Just because a bunch of us hypocrites gather to talk about him doesn't mean we are him. And I'll be the first one to tell you that I'm not a great Christian. I give it a really good try. But at the end of the day, I'm incredibly flawed. If you took a poll this morning, you'd probably find that most people are fairly upset that I have a hat on and I'm talking about Jesus on a stage. And that's just the beginning of my flaws. All of us have them. But that's the beauty of the church. That's the beauty of us all admitting that when we come in here that we don't have things all together. We sometimes dress and match alike. Like, hey, you know what? We actually don't have stains all over our clothes at the moment because we washed them. But at the end of the day, our life is still a mess. Or before people come over to our house, we make an attempt to get things clean and shiny. But the truth is, the 6 days prior, it was a complete wreck. We pull out our greatest recipes to make sure that when our food touches their palate, that it's like, wow, you're such a great cook. And the truth is, you warmed up macaroni and cheese from Kraft boxes. Come on. All of us are just a bunch of broken people that have one thing in common. We love Jesus. And sometimes we take some peripheral things and we try to force them on other people and we try to mold them into a mold that is acceptable to us and makes us happy. But at the end of the day, we don't change people. Jesus changes people. The Holy Spirit working in them changes people. We simply get to walk with them through the change. We look at the Magi and we see a completely different response. We see awe and we see wonder. We see this, I'll travel miles and miles. It would work except they were on camels. I would walk 500, no, Mary, okay. They did that. He was worth it to them. They were pagans, right? They were pagans, unassociated with Yahweh God, nothing. In fact, oftentimes they viewed their work as being godlike because they could see the future, tell the future, throw some sticks up against the wall or into a bucket and say, oh, this is what this means. Yet they said, no, we've got to come in contact with this guy. Not only that, it's not enough just to go see the spectacle. We've got to bring them something. We have to bring him something because he deserves it. So I guess one of the biggest questions I have this morning is how do we restore your awe and wonder? We hinted on this last week when we said that this Christmas season, sometimes if you've been in church for a while, you hear these stories like, yeah, I know how this one ends. For some of you, you might be hearing the story of these wise men, these Magi, for the 50th or 60th time. How do you restore the awe and the wonder? Well, I'd like to give you a third challenge of our Christmas season. The first 2 weeks, I've hosted an online Bible study through the YouVersion app where we went through an Advent study. Last week, we went through an Emmanuel, God with us study. And it's really simple. And so every single week, or every single day, you just download the app at the beginning. I can send you an invite if you just search for Clinton Older, or you go to our website right now, foundationnewnan.com/advent. You can click on the link, and it'll send you straight to where the study is. You just say, join the study. If you add me as a friend, then I'll immediately invite, well, not immediately, if you do it now, I'm busy, but in a few minutes, if you do that, then I will invite you to the study. It's 5 days long, and this week it's an incredible study. And so it's video-based. The devotion is a video-based. The video is incredible every single week. I mean, it's ridiculously incredible. If you haven't jumped in on one of our 2 studies we've done the first 2 weeks that are all about Christmas, then I really encourage you to do this one. And so the videos are incredible. The passages they put with it are helping to support what the video is showing you or illustrating for you. It takes about 5 to 10 minutes every day, and there's a place at the end where you can talk about it. And so you can leave comments, and there's a little community that's happening where people have been commenting every day. We try to screenshot a few here and there throughout the week of just some things just to remind people, hey, this is part of it. But you get to interact with people in the room, right? You get to interact and see what they're thinking. And I've encouraged all of our leaders to participate in it, because what I found 100% to be true is that we have over 10 people for sure that I'm aware of that studied the Bible for the first time 2 weeks ago when we did our very first online Bible study. That they never picked up a Bible to study it during the week until 2 weeks ago. And so and some of you are in here right now. And so you are learning how to respond to Scripture by some of you people who have been doing it a long time, and your responses, it allows them to go back. And I'm telling you this because the people that are new to this have told me, they've read your responses and they've gone back to read it again to say, oh, I see how they got that out of there. You're teaching people how to study the Bible when you respond. It's an incredible thing. And so if you want to take a stab at restoring your awe and wonder of Jesus, take the challenge and study the Bible for 5 days with me this week through the app. You can do it at any time during the day. People comment throughout the day. Here's the second thing you can do. You can bring Jesus the best of what you have. I don't know what your Christmas plans are, but the question you should be thinking about is Jesus getting the best of what I have. In other words, don't give Jesus a gift card. Because at the end of the day, like most people that you get a gift card for, they could go and buy it if they wanted to. The gift is in that you knew that they wanted it. That's the beauty of gift giving. And so, yeah, Jesus has all he wants and more. He can't run out of the things he has. But the thing that really gets him excited is knowing that you knew what he was hoping for. Bring him your best. Now, some of you might say, Clint, I'm not really sure what the best is. All I've got to bring to Jesus is heartache. I'm with you. You might say, all I've got for Jesus is doubt. I'm with you. And I say, bring it. I say, bring it. Because on the first Christmas, you know what he got brought? A bunch of stinky shepherds and a bed to lay in. They didn't even go to Walmart or Target to get one. They just put it together out of scrap wood and put some leftover animal feed in it. About a year or two later, on the second Christmas, you know what he got? He had to escape in the middle of the night and go to Egypt because the king wanted to kill him. Those were Jesus' first couple Christmases. He can take your doubt and your heartache. Bring it. As you're going through that Bible study, bring your heartache. Bring your doubt with you. Don't put it aside and say, I'm going to have to study this and be this person. No, bring it with you. Challenge Jesus with it. He's a big boy. Ultimately, the gift of Christmas is all about how you respond to Jesus. It's all about how you respond to Jesus. The goal is that you do respond, though. At the end of the day, Christmas makes us better people. The story of Christmas makes us better people. The season of Christmas makes us better people. Christmas in general makes us better people because it brings us challenges. It brings us opportunity to think. It brings us opportunity to gather together with people we don't see probably often enough. It gives us an opportunity to say we're sorry. It gives us an opportunity to tell the truth. It gives us opportunity to spend time thinking about what is it that would put a smile on my nephew's face, my son's face, my grandmother's face, my uncle's face. What is it that would make his day, her day? It gives us opportunities. Christmas makes us better people.